Since you got home first, you could at least have dinner ready by the time I get back. As soon as he got home, my husband raised his voice when he saw the empty table. Sorry. I went shopping on my way home today, so I got a bit late preparing dinner. But, I'm just as tired as you are. Ha! Don't compare your job to mine, sitting all day at a desk. You're a woman, so it's only natural you handle everything at home, even if you work, right? My once kind and gentlemanly husband turned into an emotionally abusive man as soon as we got married. Do you understand? Having a plain and unattractive wife like you around is just a nuisance to society. The least you could do is devote yourself to me, who was kind enough to marry you. Despite these words, there's only one reason I endure it. It's to protect my daughter Molly. My husband, wanting to control me, wouldn't hesitate to hurt Molly or use her to take away my parental rights if I resisted. On a particularly hard day. Hey! My mistress is pregnant. It's a boy. Excited, he thrust a divorce paper in front of me. If Molly had been a boy, I could have kept you around as just a CEO's wife. Too bad, you're no longer needed. Take Molly and leave. What? You're giving up on Molly too? Don't talk like that. I'll give child support. You take good care of Molly. Tears of relief flowed from my eyes. Finally, I could escape this life. Is that so? I pretended to be sad as I signed the divorce papers. My husband looked satisfied, thinking everything was going according to his plan. Looking at his face brought up emotions I had long suppressed. Don't you ever think you have a happy future ahead? My name is Lucy Martinez. I'm a 34-year-old company CEO's wife. Or so it sounds nice to say. In reality, I'm just a part-time office worker at a small factory. I lived with my husband Spencer and our 3-year-old daughter Molly. I met Spencer when a junior colleague asked me to make up numbers at a matchmaking party. By my late 20s, I had lost the urgency for marriage and the eager anticipation for a relationship. So, I thought this group date was just a chance to help a younger colleague find what they were looking for. Hey, what are your hobbies? You've been all smiles, but you haven't talked much about yourself since you got here, have you? My husband spoke to me as I nodded along to the conversation. Had he noticed that I wasn't really looking for anyone? I enjoy driving. It clears my head even when things aren't going well. What about you? Oh, yes. I like visiting cafes. I love reading, so I usually bring a book. As I spoke, I suddenly felt embarrassed about how mundane my interests must seem. My husband wasn't particularly handsome but was stylish, sociable, cheerful, and seemed like the type who would be popular. I also make stops at various cafes when I go driving, places with a view of the ocean, in the middle of the forest, or those old house cafes, huh? Now that I think about it, maybe I like cafe hopping too. Sounds like you know a lot of stylish cafes, huh? If you'd like, why don't we go together next time? I'm getting excited to show you all my favorite spots. From then on, we started going on drives and cafe hopping together. Being in sales, my husband was very personable and full of conversation, making our time together really enjoyable. On our third date, he shared that he was planning to quit his job at the printing company soon to work at his family's business. My dad runs a metalworking shop. I always tried to escape that kind of work, but my mom passed away 2 years ago. I've finally decided to take over. Wow, that's admirable. Your dad must be pleased, huh? He nodded with a blush, then straightened up after taking a deep breath. After a few dates, I've come to really appreciate your modesty and kindness, Lucy. Would you consider dating me with marriage in mind? He was so earnest and formal in his confession that I didn't hesitate with my answer. Yes, I'd love to. My husband said a shy yes, which was absolutely adorable. Even after we started dating, he remained a gentleman and always made sure to drop me off at home early enough so my parents wouldn't worry. Before introducing him, my parents already felt reassured, and our relationship was going smoothly. My father-in-law was very happy and welcoming when I visited their home. He had been worried because my husband had never brought a woman home before. Eventually, when we visited my in-laws, I would end up cooking dinner for 3. I'm currently brainstorming a gardening shelf for a friend. Really? Your factory can make that too? How about this idea, just as an example? Even without my husband, my father-in-law and I would get excited discussing interesting products that the factory could make. I've always loved classes where I could create things, like art and technology. My father-in-law was always thinking about what the factory could do and never hesitated to try something new. If you marry him, Lucy, why don't you work with us too? Wouldn't it be fun to create something together? Besides, he's still learning the ropes. I'd like you to support him close by. Hey, Dad! I haven't even proposed yet, don't jump the gun! But I'd be so happy if Lucy would join our family. We rarely come across such a wonderful person. With his father's encouragement, we got married a year later. My husband wanted a wedding that doubled as a honeymoon abroad, and both our families came, making it a truly joyful time. After the wedding, I also started working at the factory as an office worker, and our family of 3 managed it together. Lucy, I hear you and the CEO are cooking up something interesting? I'm thinking about how we could introduce the fun of the factory online. I'm studying it right now. A reliable planning manager, huh? I was beloved by our vice president and the craftsmen, and the office was always filled with smiles. I'm truly glad I got married, I thought to myself. The only thing that worried me was that my husband didn't come by the office much, perhaps because he was busy. After getting married, we looked for a new home near my in-laws. I had initially thought about living with my father-in-law, but my husband had other plans. Since Dad is still healthy, let's just live the 2 of us for at least the first year. His unexpected proposal made me overjoyed. I guess we're really in love, I thought, but the reality was not as sweet as I had imagined. When I get home from work, my husband is always in a bad mood, starting with just clicking his tongue or sighing at first. I'm so tired today. Since you got home first, you could at least have dinner ready by the time I get back. As days passed, he began to grumble and make snide remarks towards me. Sorry. I went shopping on my way home today, so I got a bit late preparing dinner. But I'm just as tired as you are. Don't compare your office job, where you just sit all day, to my work. You're a woman, so it's only natural for you to handle everything at home even if you work, right? Is this what they call a domineering husband? But it was clear that my husband was accumulating stress at work. He was learning about all aspects of the company's work by starting with the craftsmen, getting hands-on in the factory. Damn! That old man. Just because I made a small mistake, he starts yelling. Once I become CEO, I'm gonna fire him on the spot. Yeah, it must be tough getting yelled at even though you're doing your best. Hey, why don't you come to the office and chat? It might clear your head. What do you know? Don't act like you understand. Since he had only started his CEO training about a year and a half ago, my husband was not used to many things and was often scolded by the seasoned craftsmen. Perhaps if we had been living with my father-in-law, he wouldn't have been able to vent his stress at home. I felt that our current living situation was indeed the best for him. I'm sorry for always taking it out on you, Lucy. Thanks for always listening to my complaints. On weekends, he would apologize as if coming to his senses, and we would go driving and cafe hopping like before we were married. I thought he must trust me enough to be himself around me, which made it bearable. Until he got used to the job, I was determined to be his outlet for stress. However, that might have been a mistake. His verbal abuse only escalated afterwards. Nearly a year into our marriage, and just as he was finally getting the hang of his job, I found out I was pregnant. My father-in-law was thrilled and cried with joy. My husband was happy too, but his remarks about wanting a boy bothered me. I hope it's a boy. That would be the best way to honor your parents, and the company would be secure. Either is fine. Your father will be happy either way. I prayed that my husband's wish would come true, but the thought of having a girl made me anxious. Fortunately, I didn't have severe morning sickness, so I decided to work until just before giving birth. When I was about to enter my last month of pregnancy, my father-in-law said to me while we were alone in the office, "Thank you, Lucy, for marrying into our family. I need to say this now. Spencer may seem personable, but he struggles with forming deep relationships. I'm hoping you can continue to cover for his shortcomings." Yes, of course. If you're at the heart of both the company and our home, I'm sure everything will be fine. Please take good care of Spencer and the business. As the birth of our new life approached, my father-in-law must have been thinking about generational change. I was happy to feel trusted by my father-in-law. His factory had already become an important part of my life too. A month later, our little girl was born a bit earlier than expected. Thank you, Lucy. Thank you. Thank you for giving birth to such a beautiful granddaughter. My father-in-law rushed to the hospital after the birth and thanked me repeatedly. Seeing how thrilled he was with the birth of our child, I couldn't help but cry too. Seeing my father-in-law so moved, my husband did not complain about having a daughter, and I felt truly relieved from the bottom of my heart. But after our daughter was born, my husband started going out for drinks after work. Initially, he complained about the noise of the crying and how he couldn't relax at home, but when I returned to work 6 months after giving birth, his reasoning changed. Seeing the same faces at home and at work just doesn't let me unwind. Gradually, he went out drinking more often and came home later. Sometimes, he went out without telling me, and if he came back to find no dinner for himself, he would belittle me. "You've got it easy, don't you? Just taking care of the kid and not even bothering about your husband's meal. If you had told me, I would have known. I thought you were eating out today. I'll get it ready right away, just wait a bit." Lately, my husband has shifted from complaining about work to airing grievances about me. Perhaps it's also because our child turned out to be a girl. "At work, you're just answering phones and still getting paid, it's shameless. Maybe if you were prettier, it could have helped bring in more clients, but you're below average. Hey! I am doing my job properly, so stop saying things like that. Do you get it? Having a plain and dull woman like you is just a nuisance to society. At least try to devote yourself to death for me, who was kind enough to marry you. Useless, can only give birth to a girl." What I thought was a dominant husband turned out to be just an emotionally abusive man. Perhaps he's displeased not only with my relationship with my father-in-law and the craftsman, but also with our vice president, Mr. Smith. My father-in-law introduces as Mr. Smith, my right-hand man. My father-in-law, being a hands-on person, had Mr. Smith handle all external interactions. I wish I could have an easy job like him soon. I wouldn't need to learn this dirty work if I could just handle sales right now. I can't wait to be CEO. All I could do was sigh. Before we were married, my husband, a salesman, seemed impressive, but I never realized how little he respected sales work. Despite being the future CEO, does he really think he can manage without understanding his own company's operations? Still, I believed everything would be okay as long as my strict father-in-law was around, and I hoped my husband would change someday. The winter Molly turned 2. My father-in-law suddenly died of a heart attack. Just the day before, he had been out walking with Molly as usual. When my husband went to check on him because he hadn't shown up for work in the morning, he found him collapsed under the bed. We called an ambulance in a hurry, but it was too late, and he passed away at the hospital. Why so soon? The funeral was a blur for both my husband and me. At the funeral procession, I finally managed to cry, and Molly, stroking my forehead, comforted me with a there. Holding Molly, I cried again, at a loss for words on how to explain her beloved grandfather's passing. My father-in-law's death was a shock in many ways. Sometime after the funeral, and after my husband took over as the new CEO, He said something outrageous. Hey, now that I'm CEO, I want you to quit the company.
Why?
Why? Really, you're so clueless. Why should we pay someone who's of no use at the company? From now on, your job is the housework and childcare. Incredibly, my husband had fired me. Be grateful you got to marry me. You are, after all, still the CEO's wife. And don't worry about the office work, I've decided to hire a beauty to replace you. He said this with a smirk, and I was just dumbfounded. I had suspected that the new secretary was his mistress. I might be at my breaking point. For the first time, I seriously considered divorce. Ever since becoming the CEO's wife, our household finances had suffered. Previously, my husband contributed 60% and I 40% to our expenses, but even after I became a homemaker, this ratio remained unchanged.
We can't live like this. If you want me to focus on the house, then you need to pay all the living expenses. If that's not possible, then let's just get a divorce.
Huh? Who do you think you are? I decide if we get a divorce, not some incompetent like you. And I saw my husband's smirking mouth and had a bad feeling. If we get divorced, I'm taking custody of Molly. A fool like you couldn't possibly raise her, and there are plenty of women who could replace a mother. I thought he might actually do something so spiteful just to get at me. There was no way I could let Molly stay with a man who has yelled at her for crying since she was born and dismissed her with a wave of his hand when he was in a bad mood. I always worried he might harm her someday. Do you understand? Having a plain and dull woman like you around is a nuisance to society. You should devote yourself to death for me, who was kind enough to marry you. Furious, I restrained my shaking fist with my other hand and pleaded with my husband again.
Then, please provide enough for living expenses.
Molly is already 3, right? If needed, go out and work. That's if anyone would hire a useless person like you. Pleased with himself for belittling me, my husband burst out laughing.
You guys are home more than I am, but I'm the one who contributes more. Be grateful.
Biting my lip, I could only nod in silence. For Molly's sake, to stay by her side, I resolved to work and earn money. After my husband went to sleep, I decided to call my mother back home. I needed to sort out my jumbled feelings and wanted her to listen. Despite the late hour, my mother listened attentively, allowing me to finally fall asleep. The next day, my mother called me. Can you come over this Sunday? I have something to discuss. I didn't know what it was about, but staying at home was too painful, so I decided to take Molly and visit my parents for the weekend. My husband had sent an email saying he'd be staying with his mistress over the weekend, so it shouldn't be a problem. Ever since he had declared me redundant, he had stopped hiding his affair. He justified it by saying, "Don't complain, you're the CEO's wife, because of me." I had heard rumors from craftsmen that he was cheating with someone he met at a bar, but I never imagined he'd hire her as an office secretary. When Molly and I arrived at my parents' home, my brother Carl and my uncle Raymond were waiting in the living room.
Welcome back. I heard you're looking for a job. If you want, why don't you work part-time at my place? You can set your own hours. Really? Are you sure?
Overwhelmed by his unexpected offer, tears filled my eyes. It had been a long time since I felt such kindness, and it warmed my heart. Raymond, my father's brother, runs his own company. His wife and he don't have children and have always doted on my brother and me since we were young. Even now as adults, my aunt and I are close enough to go shopping and lunch together.
Did you know your husband's company is one of our clients? You might already know this, but things have seemed a bit risky there since your father-in-law passed away.
I knew they were clients, but I hadn't mentioned it. I really don't know anything about the company since my father-in-law died. My brother Carl is currently learning the ropes to become the next CEO of my uncle's company. While there, I heard some shocking news. After my father-in-law passed, there's been a backlash against the new CEO's policies, leading to employees quitting. Additionally, new hires aren't sticking around, and it seems their ability to take orders has diminished. Lucy's marriage place and our long-standing relationship with her father-in-law compel us to want to support them, but if the quality drops, we may need to reconsider.
That's concerning. I have a small favor to ask of the two of you.
I asked if I could keep my employment at my uncle's company a secret from my husband. I planned to inform our business contact, but I also asked my uncle to ensure it remained confidential. I didn't want my husband mocking me for getting a job through connections or using my uncle. Most importantly, I wanted to keep this as an ace up my sleeve for when the time was right. Once I started working at my uncle's company, my husband eventually stopped contributing financially to the household.
I told you to take care of the house, right?
Now that you've started working, you can handle the household expenses too. Seemingly amused by my despair, my husband smirked. He split his time between our home and his mistress's place, undoubtedly spending money there.
Don't worry, I'll at least pay the rent.
Feeling my blood boil, yet unable to retort. All I could do was prepare for a divorce by documenting his words and actions in a diary. I also followed him after work to gather photographic evidence of him with his mistress. Nearly a year into my job at my uncle's company, a turning point arrived. As I was preparing dinner, I heard loud footsteps at the entrance.
Hey!
My mistress is pregnant.
It's a boy.
Excitedly, my husband thrust a divorce paper in front of me. My husband had always wanted a son to be his successor. Still, I was shocked to learn that he had gone as far as to get his mistress pregnant.
I could have kept you as just a CEO's wife if Molly had been a boy. Unfortunately, you're no longer needed. Take Molly and leave. What? You're giving up on Molly too?
Don't talk like that. I'll give child support.
You take care of Molly.
Relief brought tears to my eyes. I could finally escape this life. Is that so? I pretended to be sad as I signed the divorce papers. My husband seemed pleased, thinking everything was going as he planned. Watching his face, suppressed emotions began to surface within me. Don't ever think you have a happy future ahead. We agreed to discuss alimony later, and I took the signed divorce papers. I immediately contacted my parents, and the next day, I left the house with Molly. 10 days later, we met to discuss alimony and child support. My husband arrived at the meeting with his mistress.
I'm sorry, I couldn't make your daughter happy. As compensation for the affair, we will pay an appropriate settlement.
Being personable, my husband apologized to me and my parents, readily agreeing to pay alimony and child support.
This is Rita, my fiancée, currently 15 weeks pregnant. We run a business, and I really wanted a son.
I'm really sorry, ma'am. It's my fault for getting pregnant with a boy, leading to you being pushed out. I was utterly disgusted by the smirking face of my husband and the triumphant expression on Rita's face. Rita, a sultry beauty of 25, had a calculating look about her. Why do people enjoy looking down on others so much?
So, you're going to pay $800 monthly for child support and a one-time payment of $100,000 for alimony?
Yes.
I want to remarry and start a new life quickly. I'd like to have the divorce notarized before that, if that's okay?
It seemed like my husband wanted to limit things for Molly, perhaps because of the child Rita was carrying. But that was actually convenient for me. I didn't want to be depended on by Molly in the future.
Understood. I'll submit the divorce papers after the notarization.
The negotiation went smoother than I expected, and I couldn't stop laughing.
Now I feel completely relieved. What are you going to do now?
Heh. Don't think this is over.
I'm going to make that man's life a living hell from now on.
We finalized the notarization. After confirming the transfer of the alimony from my husband, I promptly filed for divorce. My husband was in a hurry to remarry. It hadn't even taken 2 months. On the day the alimony was transferred, I called my ex-husband.
I've confirmed the deposit of the alimony.
Thanks.
It's going to be tough, but good luck. Well, you're competent, unlike me, so you'll be fine. What are you talking about?
His voice filled with confusion at my sarcastic tone. Isn't your company losing employees? I heard the craftsmen are quitting, and the newcomers aren't sticking around. Sales are dropping, aren't they? Did you hear that from Mr. Smith? His voice turned low and intimidating. But now that I had filed the divorce papers, I no longer had to flinch at his voice. No. The place I work part-time is one of your major clients. What? So what? Whatever you say as a part-timer doesn't matter. You're so stupid. That's why I always said you were incompetent. Haven't you understood yet? My ex-husband laughed derisively, hurling insults like idiots are hopeless and keep jokes to your face only. So, I waited for his laughter to subside before dropping the bomb. Actually, I'm working at my uncle's company. What? My ex-husband fell silent. His mind must be spinning at breakneck speed, or perhaps it's completely stopped. Up until now, they kept the work with your company because I was your wife. But now that we're divorced, there's no obligation to keep that up. It's going to be tough, but you'll need to find new clients now. After my father-in-law passed, my ex-husband had taken an arrogant approach with the clients, leading to reduced business. However, he was still managing because he had jobs from my uncle's company, a major client. Wait. Uncle? Isn't that supposed to be run by a female CEO? Even over the phone, I could sense his panic, which was quite entertaining. Yes. The company was taken over by the wife from the previous generation. My uncle is the executive vice president and her right hand. They're my ideal image of a married couple. You're lying, right? You never said anything about that. If you had told me, I wouldn't have divorced. Now it was my turn to laugh. I wanted to divorce you. That's why I didn't tell you. I did it to protect Molly. As we agreed in the notarization, don't ever come near Molly again. But. Oh, and by the way, my brother Carl will eventually take over as CEO. That means there definitely won't be any contracts with you. The other end of the phone went silent. It seemed like he couldn't even breathe. Hey, please. I've been doing my job right. Talk to the CEO for me. Weren't we married? No, we're strangers now. You treated your employees poorly. You're the one who lowered the morale in the factory. The decrease in orders and the drop in product quality are all your fault. If your father saw this situation, he'd surely cry. And I heard Mr. Smith is planning to resign too. If he leaves, it really is the end for you. My condolences. I said that and hung up without waiting for a response from my ex-husband. Afterward, he tried calling several times, but I never answered. Carl isn't guaranteed to be the next CEO, but I got carried away and said it anyway. That's a secret. I wasn't expecting this to be over so easily, but a few days later, my ex-husband showed up at my parents' house with Rita. Of course, I had no intention of letting my ex-husband in or letting him see Molly, so I spoke to him through the chain-locked door. Lucy! Please, talk to the CEO for me. I got a call yesterday about ending our contracts. I know. Since then, all the employees except Mr. Smith have said they want to quit, right? My ex-husband was visibly unsettled, scratching his head with both hands. Please! Come back! It just doesn't work without you. Let's try again. I can't face my father even in death like this. It's astonishing he could say such things in front of his newly remarried wife. Rita looked on bitterly at her husband. They must have discussed it before coming. She had successfully snatched him away to become the CEO's wife, but now, due to financial instability, she found herself clinging to his ex-wife, something she likely hadn't anticipated. I'm sorry, but I refuse. I'm useless, stupid, and incompetent, right? Besides, I don't want anything to do with an abusive jerk like you. I added another jab while he was still reeling. And haven't you forgotten? We agreed in the notarized document. You said it, right? After the divorce, we should never contact each other again. What was the penalty again? I said, and his face turned pale. If you come to see her, it's $20,000 each time. That was his own boast. He believed it would only cost him, not imagining I would enforce it. Lastly, I dropped one more bomb.
Oh, Rita, I almost forgot, but I'll also be seeking alimony for the affair. You should be hearing from my lawyer. Since he's running out of money, make sure you take responsibility for your actions. What? Eh? The divorce is final, and it's all over.
I never said I wouldn't charge you, did I? I just wanted to proceed with the divorce from my husband first. He never said not to charge you either. My ex-husband's face turned from blue to white, not my concern anymore. It was comical to see him being choked by his own rules.
Please! Stop it! I'm about to give birth soon. The company might go bankrupt. What should I do? This wasn't what I planned. Well, I don't know. Every time you come here, you'll be increasing your debt, so please don't come back again. You're about to have an important heir, so keep fighting.
I smiled sweetly and slammed the door shut. From the other side of the door, I could still hear Rita yelling and my ex-husband trying to soothe her, followed by sobs as their presence faded away. Later, my ex-husband's company faced financial difficulties after losing major clients. I thought they would close down, but eventually, my ex-husband had to let go of his stocks and step down, allowing the company to survive. That must have been his last compensation to his father. Mr. Smith took over as the new CEO, and they renegotiated contracts with my uncle's company. They even managed to bring back the craftsmen who had left, and the factory began to buzz with activity again. With Mr. Smith taking over as CEO, it seems that clients who had once distanced themselves are returning to the company. After everything, my ex-husband and Rita quickly divorced. She couldn't stand his constant verbal abuse and full-blown emotional abuse anymore. I heard from Raymond that Rita didn't wait for the birth and returned to her parents' home. Her parents covered the settlement for her, and they even sent an apology letter with the payment. She's with good parents now, so I hope she takes care of the child growing inside her. Left alone, my ex-husband sold his parents' home and moved to another town. With the additional alimony due to his abuse towards Rita and child support, he might be penniless by now. I don't know how he is doing, nor do I want to know, but seeing that the child support is being deposited regularly, he appears to be alive and working. It's unfortunate for him, he finally had the son he always wanted. A year after the divorce, Mr. Smith approached me. Would you consider coming back to us? I believe the factory, filled with the former CEO's dreams, needs you. I decided to return as an office worker to the company where my father-in-law's ethos is still alive. Welcome back, greeted by all the employees, I was moved to tears. My father-in-law always saw the potential in our small factory. They're starting new initiatives, developing original products, and responding to individual customer requests, just like when he was here. The factory is bustling with activity again. Together with the craftsmen, I'm contributing ideas and participating in new project developments.
Mommy, Grandma and I made cookies.
My 6-year-old daughter Molly greeted me with homemade sweets when I got home from work.
Thank you. They turned out delicious.
I'm so glad I could protect Molly's smile. I'm determined to keep working hard to continue this happy life with Molly.